David Jacobs Drinks Trolley is here. What are we drinking tonight?
Well, it's Halloween, so I quite like the idea of a spiced or a mulled cider. It'd be quite a nice Halloween drink.
Okay, let's go for one of those. Carrie sends in tonight's confession. Thank you, Carrie. You get the smart speaker. Well, Simon, my confession goes back to the night of Halloween 40 years ago, 1982. In my defence, Father Simon, you have to know that I have always, as long as I can remember, been not just a little bit frightened, but absolutely petrified of the dark. Darkness in my mind is filled with ghosts, ghoulies, and figures akin to Freddy Krueger and scenes from Thriller. Well into my 40s, if my husband was away, I would always look under all the beds in our house, in the wardrobes, behind every curtain before going to bed, and always slept with the light on. I had an invitation to go to a very special night out in York with a chap who spent his weekend and holidays reenacting battles from the Civil War. It was a special occasion in a beautiful grand old 16th century building. I spent almost a week's wages on hiring an authentic costume to match the meticulous turnout of fellow guests. As we both lived in a town on the south coast of England, I agreed to meet Sebastian as a fairly local location that we could drive up together. We agreed to meet on the Friday afternoon in the workshop of one of Sebastian's friends, who is called Merlin. He is a real-life druid, and when he wasn't being a druid, he was a traditional blacksmith whose main work was for the City Museum in southern England, making and repairing suits of armour and other such artefacts. Now, Merlin's workshop was on a small industrial estate just on the outskirts of the city. During the day, the workshop and the estate were pleasant enough, not at all scary. Been there a few times, and so quite happily drove up, parked the car, passed a few pleasantries with Merlin, whilst Sherlock loaded up the car with our collective belongings. The weekend was looking good. The banquet in York was a grand affair and full of people swanning around in immaculately authentic garb. They even spoke in the language of the day, bidding each other with hails and bowing and nodding and taking it all very seriously. Just your cup of tea, mate. It was a story in its own right, but not for today. On the Sunday, however, Sebastian informed me that he had some business in London and would be driving down there instead of going back to where we met. There was no alternative but for me to catch the train back to the small but very ancient city where I came from. The clocks had just gone back, so it was darker much earlier. And on that Sunday evening, the train did not arrive back until 9 p.m, at which point it was very dark, and being a Sunday evening, not many people around. I got off the train, walked out of the station and started heading towards the industrial estate to where my car was parked outside the workshop. As I left the city centre and headed down the country lane, I started to feel a sense of unease. This particular feeling escalated when the sparse streetlights stopped altogether. With absolutely nobody around, the whole area started to take on a very sinister and ominous look. My imagination sprung from its slumber and threw in some echoing footsteps and shadowy figures. I was doomed. My steps quickened as the last vestiges of light behind me faded. My heart started to race and my breath quickened as I made my way towards the isolated industrial estate marked by a couple of faint lights. I should add here, Father Simon, and the Holy Collective, that the industrial estate not only was home to Merlin's workshop, but had a storage unit full of artefacts from the museum that were not currently on display. Suits of armour, ancient clothing, stuffed dogs, that kind of thing. By the time I got, they liked that in the old days. By the time I got to the gate, to the industrial estate, I was a total nervous wreck. In my hurry to get to the car, my place of refuge, I put my overnight bag down by the gate, climbed over it in a sprightly heave, and hot-footed it to my car, which was about another 100 yards away by the workshop. I fumbled for my keys, expecting a ghostly bony hand on my shoulder at any second, unlocked the car and fell in. I fired the engine, turned all the lights on, and drove at a rate of knots towards the gate to outgun the ghostly and terrifying figures I knew were there. By this time, I'd worked myself up into a state of absolute and utter panic. I got to the gate and realised with utmost despair that it was padlocked. Father Simon and fellow confessors, I can't describe the sheer terror I was feeling at this point. I jumped out of the car, still convinced that all sorts of ghoulish and demonic figures were all around me, and pulled at the hinges of the gate. Fired by fear and adrenaline, I lifted the gate clear off its hinges and pulled it aside. I drove through and didn't stop to look back until an hour later when I arrived at my parents' house. What a relief I felt as I fell into the house and into the warmth of my family's cosy Sunday evening at home, just as they were making moves to hit the hay. As I was explaining to my mother the horrors of my last couple of hours, I realised with dismay that I had left my bag containing the hired costume by the gate. The thought of going back had me in tears, and then my dear and wonderful mother offered to drive me there to fetch it. Without further ado, we piled into the car, and without any complaint, she drove all the way back to the small but ancient city, where I retrieved my bag from the dislodged gate and back again. Father Simon and Collective, when I spoke with Sebastian the following weekend, he asked me how I'd got my car out of the industrial estate. He said that Merlin had arrived at work on the Monday morning to a ripple of excitement and intrigue over the mystery of the unhinged gate. It had taken 4 beefy men to replace the gate, and the assumption was a gang of youths or would-be thieves had tried to break in with ill intent, but there would be no damage, so perhaps they'd been scared off. In any case, the mystery was the focus of conversation across the whole estate and has never to this day been solved. And so, Father Simon and esteemed confessors, it is from the 4 beefy men that had to go to considerable effort to replace the gate, and the people who wasted many hours possibly on working out how it happened, that I seek forgiveness. I also ask for forgiveness from my wonderful mother, now 93, who drove 2 hours at night just as she was about to go to bed, rather than see me going back all alone and frightened. Lastly, I asked for forgiveness from my boyfriend at the time, Sebastian, for blatantly lying to him just to spend a weekend with another chap, albeit platonically, to see what reenactment people did for fun. Well, you know, there's a very interesting story there being told by Carrie. Anyway, Sebastian, what kind of a cad is he? Oh, I've got to go on some business. I'm ever so sorry, can't take you back. Sister Susie from the saloon bar.
Yeah, I don't forgive Sebastian for that. I too, like Carrie, am terrified of anything scary. So yeah, when it's dark and I'm walking down the street, in my own head I make up stories of ghosts and ghouls that are following me. I absolutely hate it. So I am completely on her side. I can't believe she lifted the gate though. Four beefy men had to put it back on. But I forgive her. I think fair enough, I would have done the same.
Well, they always say is if you're fired by adrenaline, you can do extraordinary things, and clearly Carrie did an incredible thing. If it's 4 beefy men against her to lift the gate, what do you say?
Well, I'm absolutely in Carrie's corner on this. It's incredible Hulk stuff, isn't it? It's being able to rip the gate off its hinges. And as you say, you know, took 4 beefy men. What they should have done is waited till it got dark and then said to Carrie, right, Carrie, there's things waiting for you unless you can get that gate back on its hinges. So yes, I'm going to forgive. Well done, Carrie.
But also, Sebastian, whoever you are,
yes,
if you've gone up together, then you go back together.
You
do not just
Correct.
swan off with Merlin.
And probably knew that the industrial estate was going to be closed.
Exactly right. Anyway, but of course, I'm not steering the jury in any way.
I mean, we are.
Are we? Oh, okay. Do you forgive Carrie?
Yes.
Yes or no? You text 61054 and the first word is Simon. Confession tonight came from Carrie, who was so terrified of the dark she lifted a huge metal grate right off its hinges due to sheer terror and caused a mystery talked about to this day. Anyway, the people's verdict is in. What do they say?
So, forgiven, says Elise in Walton-on-the-Hill. Why on earth did Sebastian leave her to make her own way home?
Exactly.
I get scared walking down the street at night, so I can totally understand why she'd be freaked out. Alice in Poole, forgiven. Carrie's superpowers definitely mean she should be forgiven. Girl power. And Jerry says forgiven. I agree with Matt and Susie. I don't forgive Sebastian for leaving Carrie to find her own way home. He agreed to drive her for the weekend. He should have seen it through. No forgiveness needed for the gate. How else was she supposed to get her car out?
If you have a confession, we would like to hear it. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Maybe you'll get a smart speaker precisely like Carrie. Drive time, confession time. Just check in live to the saloon bar. Make sure that Sister Susie's fully in charge of everything.
Of course.
Yeah, still just checking. And here comes the drinks trolley. Very good. The David Jacobs Memorial Trolley is here.
Yeah.
What have you selected for us from the trolley today?
Well, I've selected a nice maple mild by a Bristol brewery called Good Chemistry, which is a session malty bitter, 4.2%, because a local campaign ale group and camera are celebrating mild time from now until the 11th of November. So get yourselves down to your local pub and try a mild.
It's become a What's On feature.
Yeah, somewhat,
a little diary item.
Wow.
Thanks for the drinks trolley. Today's confession and smart speaker goes to Marcus. Marcus, thank you, Father Simon and the Collective of Forgiveness. My confession takes us back to the 1980s, a decade of questionable hairstyles and fashion. At the time, we loved the shoulder pads, the power suits, the spandex leggings, the leg warmers, the gold lame jackets, or the gold lame jackets, as it says here, and voluminous trousers, though not, obviously, all at the same time. I don't think I had spandex leggings myself, but maybe next week. The local youth club had organised a trip to Thorpe Park, where rides of the time included the timeless teacup ride, the Helter Skelter, and a single roller coaster, Space Station Zero. White knuckle rides were a thing for the future, so we had to make do with what was at hand. The first thing we came across was the trad Helter Skelter. The queue was long and boredom soon ensued. No phones to entertain us in those days, so we were forced to come up with our own entertainment. Because you can't just stand there and not get up to something, can you? If there'd been a busker or a conjurer, maybe we'd have been okay. A juggler would have been good, or an escapologist.
Escapologist?
We could have sung songs, I suppose, but we didn't think of that. Anyway, we'd all eaten our packed lunches of soggy sandwiches and packets of scampi fries, and then I think we had a bottle of Cresta or cream soda to wash it all down.
Yeah.
Anyway,
Wow.
there was basically nothing to do. We were super bored.
They didn't say in the 80s.
No. As the queue moved slowly, it became apparent that someone had dropped a very large tube of red paint on the floor, presumably someone from park maintenance. Teens were lining up to flick small amounts from its nozzle. This seemed to me a bit feeble and wet. So rather than pushing the tube around, I had a better idea. I put it on the ground and I jumped as high as I could and landed squarely on this very large tube of red paint, rightly securing my place as champion squeezer.
Yeah.
As a jet, a torrent of red paint flew from the now exploded tube. This result was beyond my wildest expectations. I expected a few drops or a little squirt, not the fast-flying torrent that I got. Alas, my glee was short-lived. 2 torrents in a paragraph, sorry about that. Alas, my glee, says Marcus. Alas, my glee was short-lived. Standing in front of the tube was a poor lad in white jeans, whose face now turned the same red as the paint as he looked down to see his once pristine jeans were now covered in red paint. It was like a scene from a 70s slasher movie that I hadn't seen yet. And Chummy here had just been mauled by a Freddy Krueger-style villain, or maybe a werewolf from the moors. The red seemed to start at his upper thigh and continue all the way down to his ankle. Now, you might think, as we did, what kind of idiot wears white jeans to a theme park?
Yeah.
If you're in ABC, you happen to be Martin Fry, or in Duran Duran and were called Simon Le Bon, you might get away with it. But anyone else, no, don't bother. Now, you also might think that I need White Trouser Boy's forgiveness for this, because now I'm older and I've had time to dwell on my acts. But no. You see, he had only taken what turned out to be half of the paint. The rest, it seems, had landed on some of the helter-skelter mats that lay strewn casually around us. You see, the mats were the familiar doormat style, but painted red. So therefore I have to seek forgiveness from the dozens and dozens of people who used the Helter Skelter that morning. Anyone who used it ended up with red stains on their bottoms, which, when you think about it, is never a good look.
No, it's not.
I also seek forgiveness from the park for no doubt many complaints that were received that day. If it's any consolation, says Marcus, I spent the remainder of the day hiding from anyone in white jeans, and let me tell you that at that time, there were absolutely loads of them. Who'd have thought that back in the day?
Yeah.
All the white jeans. Do you have white jeans, Matt?
No, I never had
Not
white
sure.
jeans. No.
Susie, you're a white jean woman?
Yeah, I had a pair back in the day.
Back in the
yeah,
80s,
definitely
we
did.
all had them.
Did we?
We absolutely
Yes.
all had them.
I don't think
Anyway, and Marcus clearly, through an act of reckless selfishness, spoilt it, not just for White Trouser Boy, but also for anyone who sat on the mat and then ended up with prickly red marks on their backside. Anyway, Sister Susie goes first.
Well, Marcus, I just can't tell you how cross I would be if I'd got off that Helter Skelter and my bottom was covered in red paint.
Yes.
I'd be so cross.
But also,
But
you wouldn't
that
know.
Poor person. Yeah, you wouldn't know because, someone would have to come up to you and no one's telling you got red paint on your bottom. And that poor man in those jeans, covered in red paint, and you didn't ask for forgiveness from him. You didn't care about him.
No.
I'm sorry. No, I can't forgive you.
I think there is some merit in the don't wear white jeans to a theme park. I suspect that might be a line taken up now there by a brother from another gutter.
well, I don't wear white trousers at all. A little too
it's fashion.
continental for my tastes, I think. But also, here's a little life lesson. Watch where you're putting your bottom. Don't sit on something that's got paint on it.
They
there you
didn't
go.
know- they didn't know
Okay,
he had
how
paint.
do
I mean, far
it
be
was
it
red.
from me to get all nanny state about it, but isn't it about time you looked where you were putting your bottom? So for that reason, I choose to forgive.
Okay, well, some interesting reasoning there.
Yeah, very
does Marcus get your forgiveness? That is the issue, and the people's verdict is expected. First, the people's verdict on today's confession, a helter-skelter confession from Marcus, who basically jumped on a tube of paint, sprayed red paint over some poor chap who had white jeans, and then it went over the helter-skelter mats, so everybody had very red bottoms for the rest of the day. People's verdict, here it comes.
So Mike in Devon says, forgiven. I agree with Matt.
Oh, yes,
you should look where you sit. It brings a whole new meaning to rosy cheeks. Harry's mum says, Harry, who's still on half-term, wavered momentarily, but then said, he agrees with Matt. It was quite funny, he says. But Jess in Chiswick says, not forgiven. As someone with a passion for fashion, I'd be fuming if someone got red paint on my clothes. He didn't even offer to pay for the dry cleaning bill.
Correct. And if you have a confession for us, maybe inspired by what you've just heard, send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. If we use it, you get a smart speaker.
Correct. Well done, Suze. Suze agrees with me.
Susie's on my side.
No.
No, I'm not on Matt's side.
You're not on my side.
No.
See?
It's like, again, I am very much showing the way as far as taste in fluids are concerned.
Anyway, the drinks trolley is coming
there it
around.
is.
What is our drink of the day?
What about a nice glass of rosé today? The one that we have in a pub is the Pinot Rosé, which is very delicious.
Okay,
so
that's seasonal. Today's confession comes from Gracie. Gracie, thank you very much. Father Simon and the Temple of Mercy. In the late 1970s, I was a fifth year at our local school. I was hardworking and I was diligent. We were a good crowd and a fine example to the snotty fourth years below us. The sixth formers, however, in our school were always annoying. Although less than a year in age difference, the sixth formers were arrogant and smug, swanning around as though they owned the place, noses in the air, snooty and unpleasant. Also, they were able to wear what they liked in lessons, and they all wore prefect badges. How does that happen?
What?
They had their lessons in the winter in their flared jeans and warm tank tops, whilst we sat in the same drafty classrooms in just our school uniform. Thin school shirt, thin school jumper made of nylon, thin school dress made of Hessian sackcloth.
What?
At break time, we were all made to stand out in the school yard in all weathers, whilst they went to the sixth form common room for tea, coffee, Tizer and ginger snaps. Sometimes chocolate penguin biscuits. We knew that because they would ball up the wrappers and throw them at us. If we had a Bullingdon club in our school, they would all have been in it, posing and poncing around and being thoroughly nauseating. Okay, Gracie, we get the picture. Anyway, in the spring of the late 70s, a terrible fire unfortunately caught the roof of our school gymnasium, and there was a lot of damage due to the fire and water. Luckily, the gym was saved, but there was a lot of smoke and water damage to that area, including the offices and the sixth form block. It was on the news and everything. My friend and I decided it would be hilarious if the sixth formers thought that they had to come in and help clear it up. It was the weekend, and with no mobile phones or internet in those days, we turned to our trusty local radio station and we passed on a message and asked them to put out a plea to all sixth formers to come in and help. Signed, the deputy head. We made it clear that they were to wear old clothes, Wellington boots, and bring buckets, spades and brooms. Your school needs you. We're all in this together. That kind of thing. It was quite an inspiring message, really, appealing to any dormant feelings of community solidarity that lay deeply buried in the souls of our awful sixth form. We went along and watched the sixth formers turn up off the buses, off their bicycles, and many dropped by their parents. The sight was spectacular and still brings a smile to my face. They're all trying to be fashionable, looking like Paul Weller or Nick Hayward or Kate Bush, but Paul, Nick and Kate on cleaning duty. They, of course, were all thanked but turned away. The puzzled, confused and then angry looks on their entitled little faces was a joy to behold. Then, dressed as they were, as cleaners, they had to either wait for the next bus, walk or cycle or go to the telephone box and call mummy or daddy as they were all stranded with their buckets and cloths and brooms. Boy, did they look mad. Scuffles broke out as they jostled for position in the bus queue. I don't think they'd queued before. They looked the saddest bunch of elite students you've ever seen. We chortled all day and were chortling still when we went back to school on the Monday. The sixth formers after report were still mad, but they had no one to get mad with, as they didn't know who had set them up. The situation festered for a while. Then a few weeks later, myself and my friend were called into our head of years room, and Mrs. Arbuthnot told us that she had spoken to the local radio station, and it appears I had foolishly given my first name at the beginning of the call. Mrs. Arbuthnot was not happy with us, but my friend piped up and gave what I can only describe as an Oscar-winning performance as a wronged person. Oh, pardon me. She announced to Mrs. Arbuthnot that we were in the top class of the year and would not be that stupid to give their names away. And someone phoning in with a hoax would in fact give a fake name, which just so happened to be my Christian name. We had been set up, surely, and she could see that. Well, although Miss Arbuthnot had her doubts, she apologised and let us go. So my apologies to Miss Arbuthnot, who I believe is still alive, and as technically we lied to her. Well, not technically, Grace. You just lied to her.
Yes.
That's the thing. It was just a lie. I would also like, here's a nice final line, I would also like to thank my lovely friend for her quick thinking and know that now she can see... I'll start again. It's a nice line. I'd like to thank my lovely friend for her quick thinking and know that I can safely tell this tale as she is retired from the police. Sadly, as hard as I try, I still have a smile on my face recalling all those sixth formers. Yours, begging for a little bit of forgiveness if you got any going, young Gracie. Well, let's go to the saloon bar first of all. Sister Susie.
Oh, Gracie, I really appreciate all the effort you went into, and I really do. I don't know if I can forgive you, not only for what you did, but also for the fact that you gave your name. Why would you go through all of that and then give your real name to the radio station? But fair dues to your friend for all of that quick talking to cover it up. But yeah. I can't forgive you, no.
Brother from another gutter.
There's so much to love about this, isn't it? It's the perfect crime, because of course, why would you give your real name if you were calling this in to the radio station? A great twist about the police, and I love all the resentment against all those entitled sixth formers. And frankly, if the Bullingdon Club was only about just eating too many penguin biscuits, we wouldn't be in the state we're in now. Whoa, I think so. I think so. So therefore, definitely forgiven.
Okay. People's verdict, please, 61054. Do you forgive Gracie, yes or no? Anyway, the people's verdict, here it comes.
So Miss Arbuthnot says, not forgiven. As a current teacher, I cannot forgive that sort of prank, but surely the radio station should have checked with the school before broadcasting this request. Jane in Bournemouth says, forgiven. Totally understand the frustration at the sixth formers. No harm was really done. They should have volunteered to help with the school gymnasium roof in the first place. And finally, Genevieve says, forgiven, as I laughed so hard at this. And to add, I was also a fellow country dancer at primary school. I even went to the country dancing championship.
There you go. Who knew? We weren't allowed to enter if I'd known. As long as I could have danced with the same girl.
Oh.
Anyway, because do you enjoy country dancing? Depends who you're dancing with. That's the whole thing. Anyway, you might have a confession based around school, based around country dancing. Who knows? If we use it, you get a smart speaker. That's the deal. All you have to do is to send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk. Confession time. Let's just check out the drinks trolleys that's coming round.
I love it.
On the side. What are we having today? What's our drink of the day?
Well, I've gone a bit rogue today. I had my first pumpkin spice latte on the way in, so I thought, why not that for a drink of the day?
Like in Bristol, is it?
Talking about Christmas.
Okay, pumpkin spice latte. Okay. Matt's sneery face is actually audible.
Rolling his eyes.
Today's smart speaker and confession it comes from Buster. Thank you, Buster. Father Simon and the Saintly Posse. Now, can I just say before we go any further?
Oh, yes.
If you're eating...
Oh no.
Good, yeah.
You might just want to just... Ones. Well, you know, it's just... It's a little bit... A little bit... This tale takes us back to 1996, and as a young chap, I decided to take the plunge and buy my first home. Clearly, this is a very, very... It's like period drama.
Yeah.
When was that?
It was a two-bedroom semi in Bracknell. It gave me a newfound freedom to have friends over and, importantly, entertain members of the fairer sex in the prospect of one day meeting Mrs. Wright. I think you mean Miss Wright, because if you met Mrs. Wright, she'd already be spoken for. Anyway, at the time, with a new mortgage and ensuring I could continue to drive the rather ambitious sports car I'd bought, I decided it might be a good idea to get a lodger and make some extra cash from that spare room. I duly asked my friend Merv, It was a good laugh, and I thought we would get on well in a house share. Indeed, Merv also considered it was a great idea and moved into the spare room. All was going well, and we had various friends over to watch video cassettes. Had a few drinks and a few pizza nights, that kind of thing. In due course, Merv met and started two-timing a couple of girls within a short space of time. One was a local girl called Linda, and the other, called Roxy, was all the way up in Grimsby, who I recall would drive all the way down in her green VW to visit Merv. It did, however, it seemed to me, that Merv was going for quantity rather than quality. Being from different towns gave him the ideal opportunity to ensure that neither Linda nor Roxy found out about each other. However, that did need my unwilling participation. Back then, we didn't have mobiles or social media, which meant it was easier to be hard to get hold of.
Okay.
Oh my
You
goodness.
could only ring someone on the landline. This meant that if Merv was out with Linda, I would need to give Roxy the agreed excuse of the day, or vice versa, which in that case could have meant a whole weekend of fabrication. This ranged from, he's out with his brother playing snooker, he's gone to church, or he's helping his gran with her made-up garden. Which, in fact, he was out gallivanting unbeknownst to his other girlfriend. Now, I didn't feel particularly happy being placed in this collaboration of deceit. One Sunday, Merv came back from Grimsby, and I noticed at the end of that week that his toothbrush was missing from the bathroom. Being a guy's house before the days of men using things like face cream, there wasn't a lot else in there, so it was pretty obvious that something was missing. I thought he'd probably forgotten it and just left it at Roxy's, so I asked him why he'd not have a toothbrush for several days, and he said, "Oh, it's okay, I've been using yours."
What?
As you can imagine, I was not amused and told him so in no uncertain terms to go to the local shop immediately, buy a new one, which he did, whilst I subjected my toothbrush to some boiling water. That weekend, Merv did actually go out with his brother, he came back considerably the worse for wear. In fact, to the extent that he'd been somewhat unwell in the night. When I got up in the morning, the bathroom was not a pretty sight. Merv was still in bed with his hangover. I looked around for something to clean everything with. You know where this is going.
No.
On the side was Merv's new toothbrush. Firm white bristles, sticking out from a shiny red plastic handle. Combination of being asked to lie to his unsuspecting girlfriends, using my toothbrush, and now the state of the bathroom reached in my head a crescendo, and in true military fashion, I gave the loo a vigorous scrub using his new toothbrush and popped it back on the counter afterwards. The following week, Merv got dumped by both girls within 2 days.
Good.
And was pretty cheesed off about the whole thing. I honestly didn't have much sympathy, and we parted company a couple of months later. In the end, I bought another house and left my first home, and I got married to Mrs. Wright. Presumably, Mr. Wright.
It's right.
Really, really was.
Yeah.
I don't know what happened to Merv. I do feel some remorse for my participation in the deception of the two girls, but probably less so regarding the toothbrush, and perhaps Linda and Roxy would be pleased to know that a little bit of karma came their way when they weren't expecting it, because I imagine that they were pretty fed up with the whole thing. Anyway, it's a squalid tale, which Buster offers us, but I'm not sure whether, the fact that he was provoked means he's justified in his actions. Sister Susie has an unpleasant look on her face.
I just feel a bit sick. No, Buster, I don't care. You shouldn't have used your toothbrush, but also you shouldn't have just boiled your toothbrush. You got a new one too. You should have bought two new toothbrushes.
Ten like a quid.
Do you not have something to clean the toilet with that's not a toothbrush? I don't care if you wanted to get revenge. It's not very nice. And if you didn't tell the girls, then it's not karma, is it? Because they don't know. And it's just disgusting.
Yes.
No, not forgiven.
Never let your karma run over your dogma. That's the most important thing.
So true.
Brother from another
Yeah,
guy.
I mean, you could get a toilet brush. That's what you need. Toilet brush instead of a toothbrush for clean. I'm using my toothbrush to clean the oven. I only discovered that this week, and it's fabulous.
An old toothbrush, though.
Well, just any toothbrush will do. People always get very
you're not gonna brush
squeamish
your
about
teeth
you
again.
using tooth. It's fine. I mean, you
don't
wash
have
them.
oven cleaner
The
in
fact
your
is, it's all pipes.
But you're not going to clean
The
your
water
oven and then brush your
goes
teeth.
everywhere. So, in that sense,
Yes.
I'm right and I forgive.
Right.
Yeah.
But you actually...
What? No.
Clean
You
the
don't
clean the
your
oven
What, and
with
then
a
brush your teeth
toothbrush.
again?
Well, no, I'm not brushing
an
my
old
teeth in the oven.
toothbrush.
I just clean the oven with the toothbrush. The water's going everywhere, Sue.
Buy another toothbrush.
It's so easy to understand.
But it's not the one you use.
Use the toothbrush in the oven.
Anyway.
Don't clean your teeth in the oven, kids.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Very strange man. People's Vote, do you forgive Buster, yes or no? I expect the answer will be no, but anyway, you can text it to 61054. First word is Simon. The people's verdict, please, on Buster's confession. Merely moments ago, we had Buster's confession. A torrid tale of his new mortgage, his mate called Merv, 2 girlfriends and 1 toothbrush. And the people's verdict is in, and it goes like this.
Alex in Cambridgeshire says, not forgiven. Not for Merv's sake, though. How can Buster claim this was karma for Merv's two-timing when he was acting as a spin doctor,
Yes.
covering Merv's tracks? He could have let the women know. That would have been karma. Marnie says, not forgiven. Ew, how gross. Toothbrushes should be used to clean one thing and one thing only.
Like not
And
ovens, Matthew.
That thing is not the loo or an oven. However, Roy says, forgiven. A toothbrush is also great for cleaning your vacuum filter.
Is that right?
Yeah,
Who
I
knew?
think- yeah,
I
all
agree
these
with
things.
Matt, says
Yes,
everybody.
correct.
So maybe some two-timing confessions or a logic confession. If you have one and we use it, we'll exchange it for a smart speaker. That's the deal. Send it to confessions@greatesthitsradio.co.uk.